Welcome to the beginner's tutorial of cloud application development. So today we'll study about microservices. So let me introduce what is microservices and what are some benefits of it. So you just see this picture. You can see the people, multiple set of people working together to build a complete service. So let me tell you what is microservices are. Actually, microservices are an architecture and organizational approach to a software development, which means it's like it's building small components together and make a complete um, software. These are like small independent services, right, that communicate over well-defined APIs. So we'll study about how the APIs are built and what are the APIs do, right? Then I'll tell about microservice architectures make applications easier to scale and faster to develop. Okay, and it enable innovation and accelerating time to market for new features. Right? So it's somewhat completely differ from monolith application development. Like monolith means it's one way a compact application development than microservice architecture. Right? And there are some characteristics of microservices. It's autonomous, right? And it is specialized. So what's mean by autonomous is each component service in microservice architecture can be developed and deployed, operated, and scaled without affecting the function of other services. Right? And specialized means each services is designed for a set of capabilities and focus on solving specific problems. Okay, and there are so many benefits in microservices. Those are like it's agile and flexible scaling, and it's easy to develop. Like there are so many features. Okay, so let's start with Springboot. Okay, so what we're going to do is we'll create microservices today along with Springboot, because this tutorial is completely based on Springboot and how microservices can be applied to Springboot cloud. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today. And more than that, we'll install Postman, and I'll give you what is an understanding about Postman and how it's work and how that microservice structurized, so we can easily see that through Postman. So I'll give the download link to download Postman, and while I am explaining, I'll give you a quick intro about Postman as well. Okay, so let's start with Spring Boot, Spring Boot project, and while we doing that, I'll explain about how to install Postman and how that the JSON files are structured and microservices are structured. Okay, so let's start. So we'll start create new Spring starter project, and we just simply give a name, Spring microservice. Okay, Spring microservice. So it will be like a payment service, like order something. Okay, I just use in version 8, and other I just leave it as it is, just give a name. Okay, okay, just next. So it's a panel, like it shows to download dependencies. So I'll select and download the dependencies that we need. Okay, so uh, search for H2. So I'm going to use H2 database here, because it's like H2 is a relational database management system. Okay, so it's written in Java, and it can be enabled in Java applications or run in client server mode. Right? So it's somewhat easy. Or else if you wanna go with the SQL, database, you can do that as it is. Okay, go with G Spring Data JPA, then Rest. Okay, Rest repositories. Okay, so these three things we're going to use here. These three dependencies: Spring Data JPA, H2 database, and REST repositories, because we're going to create microservices all along with REST repositories. Okay, and it enables some quick interaction. Okay, so we're going to use REST repositories as well, so it will avoid a bunch of coding. Okay, so we don't have to use much more complex coding. Okay, so what we're going to do next, okay, we'll download all this. Okay, so it takes some sort of a time. Okay, so it will get downloaded, so we'll wait until it's get downloaded. So everything getting downloaded, so let's start editing with. Okay, okay, so everything get downloaded, so let's start editing with the application properties. So just go here and add some properties. Okay, so actually we can set a name, right? So spring dot application dot name. Okay, so we can give any name. Spring. Okay, so just a name, any name, and I'll set server port. So usually we use like it'll go with default port, but if you don't want to go to that port, we can bypass it. So I'm going to use 3009. Okay, so any free port you can use. Okay, next what we're going to do is we'll enable h2 console, because we use h2 database, so we'll enable that. So spring dot h2 console enable, that should be true. Next, spring, yeah, spring dot data data source URL. Okay, so that should be jdbc h2 any name. Okay, so I will give name cloud db. Okay, so it's just a URL, right? How it should redirect. So if you wish, you can change the name of a database. Then spring dot data dot jpa dot repository bootstrap more default. Okay, so these are the customizations what we did in application properties. So let me build, so you can go with the shortcut control and B to build. Okay, so you can build. Okay, so we can run this, we can run this as Springboot. Okay, so because now we configure this h2 database, so let's check whether it's running properly. Okay, that's this. Okay, okay, so let's get built. Let's get started. Wait. Okay, it's refreshing. It's okay. So started microservice application. Okay, Spring microservice application Java started. Okay, so let's check whether how it's okay. So let's check whether the H2 database is working properly. So I just go with the localhost, my port number, then slash H2 console. So it's working fine, and we can see here our JDBC URL is it takes the URL name. Okay, then what we need to do, okay, so it's in order. Okay, so let's connect. Okay, so when we connect this, let's get started. Okay, so there is no tables or anything here, but it's working fine, right? So if it is started fine, then our uh, database connection is working fine. Okay, so let's create a class. Okay, so a class of entity, and I'll create inside my demo package. So what I'm going to do, create new class. Okay, and I'll create a class called orders. Okay, so usually these microservices are mostly used in e-commerce apps, and there are so many applications, but mostly. So I'll go with the class name orders. Okay, and finish. So let's create an entity. So make this class as an entity. Okay, so how we can make this as an entity class? So we can simply annotate this with entity. Okay, so it shows some assistance. Okay, so we made this class as an entity. Okay, so let's create some variables like private long id. Okay, so simply a key, then private long, there must be a customer, so I'll go with customer id, then private, let's go with string order name. Okay, so these are the variables that we create. So every time when we had a set of variables, I told you id is my key, so let me make that uh, variable as an id. Okay, so it's my id, and every time when I create an id, I just set that generated value, and this strategy is equal to generation type auto. Okay, so this should auto generate. So let me resolve this resistance, then okay, so there is no errors. Okay, so let's create a constructor here. So Java source. Okay, so at the beginning I'll create an null constructor. Okay, so public orders, we don't need this. Okay, then we'll create another constructor using field. Okay, and we set this id as a auto generated value. Okay, so I remove that and I generate. Okay, so usually we don't need this. Okay, so let's go to the next step. We need to create some getters and setters to access this data. Okay, so this id we didn't use, right? Id is a primary key. Okay, so that will auto generate. We'll get an access for customer id and order name. Okay, so let's generate this. So get order name, set order name, Okay, and get custom ID, set custom ID. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so let's simply save this, and I'm going to run this and check whether okay. So when every time when there is a process in running, so usually we go with stop and relaunch. Okay, so it's shut down and relaunch. Okay. Okay, so it started working. So we'll check that this class is considered as an entity inside our database. So let's check. Okay, so connect. So now you can see here there is a table called orders. Okay, and it has the fields ID, customer ID, and order name. So it's working fine. Okay, so now you can see here orders ID, customer ID, and order name. Okay, that's fine. So what we have to do next is like there's no data, so it's not complicated, right? It's simply as it is like SQL based. So you can simply write all the SQL commands here, select all from orders and stuff. Okay, select all from orders and run. Okay, and we can see the table format: ID, customer ID, and order name. Okay, and the data table is empty. Okay, so the thing is like we don't need a controller here, right? Because in Spring Data REST, okay, so in Spring Data REST, it removes standard text copy of documents, okay, or methods or procedures, okay, that may be used over again and again without making major changes to the original, okay, original code. So that's why we don't need a controller here because we use REST, okay, data REST, okay. So we'll go to the next step and do it. Okay, so let's create a repository, okay, inside that package. So let's create new repository. Okay, so inside this create new repository, usually a repository interface. Okay, so I select Java interface and I give a name orders repo. Okay, orders repository, and finish this. Okay, so this is my orders repository. Okay, so let's make this repository extends. Okay, extends paging and sorting. Okay, then we have to give the class the entity class name orders and no. Okay, so this is the data type of our primary key that we used here. Okay, so here the id is long value and my class name is orders. Okay, so it asks me there's an error. Okay, so actually paging and sorting repository includes all the methods that we used in CRUD application. So you know what's CRUD application: create, read, update, and delete applications. CRUD applications. Okay, so uh, that's why we use paging and sorting repository. It gives a default CRUD application methods. Okay, so to expose this um, Spring Data REST services, so let's annotate this class with repository, which means REST repository. Okay, so repository REST. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell that okay, so let me hit this. Okay, so this is my REST repository okay, REST repository resource, and we have to tell, okay, so we can see that target and retention and inherited values. So how this format should be given. So inside this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell that collection resource. Okay, so what that mean is we have to tell where this, okay, so where this REST repository parts are organized. So I'm going to give a name orders, okay. Then the path, usually we use an auto-wired uh, annotation, and also in that path we give a mapping path, so it's a mapping path, okay. So I'm going to give orders, okay. So you will know that after we seen through postman why we use orders, okay. And the default command, we need to list all the data, so I'm going to say that list orders, and the method we're going to use find by order. Usually it's suggesting, but not this time. Okay, so find by order name, and we need to say what parameter we are using. That parameter what we use is order name. Okay, so along with order name, I'm going to list all the products. So I tell that string order name variable is used. Okay, so it says it couldn't able to find list, so list is in utility. Okay, again parameters. Okay, cool. Okay, so I fix everything. Okay, so this is my order repository. Okay, so we customize our order repository, and we need to pass two parameters, like it's like we can say this is our base URL, right, and the path is which is used to make HTTP request, because everything through online, when we make microservices it calls with the protocol HTTP. Okay, so that's the path we're going to use it. Okay, so this is my order repository. Okay, so I just let me make it bigger. Okay, print the other side. No. Okay. So and you can see my orders and orders repository. Okay, so let me save everything. Okay, what we're going to do is, okay, what we're going to do is next we'll edit this microservice application and add some data and check whether how it's working. Okay, so inside this, what we need to do, we already had this orders repository, so let's auto-wire this to make this application to find. We had a repository called order repository. Okay, so usually we use auto wire. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to auto wire it private orders repo. Okay, so object, let's make an object. Okay, and auto wire. Okay, now fine. Okay, so I get an object of order repository, and I'm going to use it inside this Spring microservice application class. Okay, so this is responsible for running this microservice application. Okay, so we auto wired this, What we're going to do next is we'll create a bean inside this microservice application. We know that what's bean and what's the use of bean. Okay, so let's create an initializing bean. Okay, initializing bean. Okay, so I'll write a method called send database. Okay, so that's what we're going to do with this initializing bean. So we know that initializing bean is a type of a bean. So if we going to use a bean, we need to annotate that as a bean. Okay, okay, initializing bean. Okay, okay, let's fix that as well. We need to write a return method. Okay, okay, so inside this, okay, after return I should exit it. Okay, no problem. So now it has structurized. We created a bean, and what we're going to do with this bean is we'll send some data using this bean. Okay, so order orders repo. Okay, so we using that object, what we're going to do is we're going to save. Okay, so what we're going to do, new entity orders. We had a method. Let me check. Yeah, it's orders. Okay, so orders. So what's my first order? I need to give a customer ID. He is going to use let's go with Apple iPhone. Okay, iPhone 11 Pro. Okay, we use that as a string, right? Okay, and my next one. Okay, I just simply copy this. Okay, the same customer ordered iPhone 13 Pro Max. Okay, there is an Android user also, so he ordered Sony. Actually, that's the new series. Xperia. I, okay. And there is one more customer. He's doing Oppo. Extra. Okay. There are some phone models. Okay, I use some Android and iOS or sponsors. Okay, so these are some random data. You can go with any data. Okay, so let's run this application and check whether this database gather the data or not. Okay, so let's run this. So I stop and run this. Okay, let me check. Okay, it started, so there is no issues. So let me check and refresh this. Continue. Connect. Okay, so I told you you can apply all the SQL commands here. So select all from orders, and you can see here this data is added successfully into that table. Okay, so this is my customer. This is my customer ID and my order. My customer ID and my order name. Okay, so now you can see how it's working. Okay, now we can see how it is structurized. Okay, so we have to go to postman postman download. Already I download and install, so you can see here download postman, get started for free. Okay, so this is it. Okay, simply you can download and install this postman. It's very useful. Okay, so it's very useful to find that HTTP request, how it's passed. Okay, so let me introduce how it's structurized and how that JSON code are extracted. Okay, so let me start the Postman. Okay, so this is how Postman interface. Okay, so if you don't have a new collection, simply click this. Okay, so now you can create a new collection. Okay, I just delete this. Okay, already I had a collection. Inside that you can click on this new request. Okay, so I'm going to use a get request. Okay, I'm going to enter the URL of localhost. Okay, this one. So I'm going to enter the request URL and send. Okay, so inside this, let me make it bigger. Inside this you can see it has, it creates the URL along with the structure, right? So you can see here page, size and sort. Okay, then it has created a profile URL also. Okay, so simply when you click on header you can see how it is created. Okay, okay, so basically what I'm going to tell you is it's in a JSON structure, right? And you can simply click on this and you can see how it is. Okay, right? I give a request. Okay, when I give the request it says how it is structured, like orders and everything, right? So when I click on this, okay, when I click on this I can see that there is orders tab, right? So if I pass a URL like /orders, you can see customer ID, and this is my order name, and the links that it created is here, which are here /1. Okay, /1, then order 2/2. Okay, and it creates separate links for each and every entities that we created. Okay, so you can see here on the row coding. Okay, so in our next class I'll tell about how these orders and everything are working. Okay, okay, so now you see how Postman is working and how it's structured my requests. Okay, so you can, okay, so there are 11 searches. Okay, so you can see how your searches are working. Okay, and we learn more and more about what is Postman and how we can send and receive requests and responses for it. Okay, so if you are done with this sending the data to the database, and if it is work fine with your request, you are fine. And in our next class we'll develop microservices to consume RESTful API using REST template. Okay, so that's what we'll study in our next class. Okay.